My wife announced, "I want us to have a baby," using my ex-husband's frozen sperm from 10 years ago. I stared at her. She said, "You'd still be the dad." I replied, "Interesting parenting model." Then I showed her the vasectomy appointment I'd booked for next week. Original post. I, 36 male, have been married to my wife for 4 years. Together for 6 total. Met at a friend's wedding, hit it off, the whole cliché thing. She was divorced, no kids from her previous marriage. Seemed like a fresh start for both of us. What I didn't know until about 8 months into dating was that she and her ex-husband had frozen embryos. Well, technically his sperm and her eggs stored separately at some fertility clinic. They'd been planning for kids when their marriage imploded. She told me the storage fees were paid up for years, and she just never dealt with it. I thought it was weird, but not a deal breaker. People have complicated pasts. Fast forward to last Tuesday. We're sitting at dinner, normal weeknight. I'm eating leftover pasta, she's picking at a salad. Then she hits me with, "I've been thinking a lot about starting a family." Cool. We discussed this. I was on board for kids eventually, maybe in a year or 2 when we had more savings. I talked to the fertility clinic today, she continued. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Okay. The eggs I froze, they're getting older. Viability decreases. But combined with quality sperm, we have really good chances. Right. So you want to do IVF? We can look into. I want to use my ex-husband's sperm. I just stared at her, like my brain blue-screened for a solid 10 seconds. His sperm has been stored properly for 10 years. It's high quality. We already paid for the storage. It just makes sense. You want to have your ex-husband's baby. While married to me, she reached across the table and grabbed my hand like she was explaining something to a slow child. You'd still be the dad. Legally, emotionally, everything. The sperm is just genetic material. It doesn't mean anything. Genetic material from your ex-husband. We were young and stupid when we got married, but he had good genes. Tall, smart, no family health issues. This is practical, not emotional. I pull my hand back slowly. That's an interesting parenting model. She smiled, clearly thinking it was coming around. Right? And it saves us so much money on sperm donors. Those are like $500 to $1,000 per vial. I stood up, walked to the kitchen counter where I'd left my phone, and pulled up my calendar app. Showed her the screen. "What's this?" she asked. "Vasectomy consultation. Booked it 3 days ago for next Thursday." Her face went through about 6 emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, shock, anger, more anger. "What? You scheduled a vasectomy without telling me?" Seemed about as appropriate as planning to use your ex's sperm without telling me. Except I was actually going to discuss it with you before the appointment. You know, like adults do. That's completely different. Ow! She couldn't answer. Just sat there opening and closing her mouth like a fish. "I've been thinking about it for a while," I said, sitting back down. "Wasn't sure if I wanted kids at all anymore. Was going to talk to you about it this weekend. But now I'm thinking my gut was right. You can't just decide that. This affects both of us. So does secretly planning to have another man's biological child and expecting me to raise it? It's not another man. It's just stored genetic. It's your ex-husband, the guy you were married to before me, the guy whose baby you apparently still want to have." She started crying. "You're twisting this. I don't want him. I want a baby. And this is the most practical. Practical would be discussing it with your current husband before contacting fertility clinics. Practical would be acknowledging that asking your husband to raise his wife's ex's biological child might be, I don't know, a lot." She stormed off to the bedroom, slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall in the hallway. I slept on the couch that night, not because she kicked me out, but because I genuinely couldn't look at her. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Made coffee, kissed my cheek, said, "Let's just forget yesterday, okay? We can talk about this when we're both calmer." I'm not calmer. I'm just quieter. Here's the thing that's eating at me. She didn't just float this idea. She called the clinic. She'd already been discussing logistics. When I asked how far along these discussions were, she admitted she'd been talking to them for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of planning this behind my back. I haven't canceled the vasectomy appointment. At this point, I'm thinking I might actually go through with it. The thing that keeps replaying in my head is her face when she was explaining this to me. She genuinely believed I'd be on board. Like this was a reasonable request. Like any husband would just nod and say, "Sure, honey, let's have your ex's baby together." Is this what our marriage has been? Her assuming I'd go along with whatever she decided? Because looking back, I'm starting to see patterns I missed before. We'll update if anything changes. Update 1, 5 days later. Didn't expect this to blow up. Thanks for the comments. Here's what happened. So after my last post, things were tense, but quiet for about 48 hours. My wife was doing that thing where she acts super sweet and pretends the conflict doesn't exist, hoping I'll just drop it. Making my favorite dinners, being extra affectionate, the whole routine. Then her mother called. I was in the kitchen when my phone rang. Saw it was her mom and figured I should answer, since ignoring it would just create more drama. "Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up?" My daughter called me, crying, saying you're abandoning her and refusing to have children. I pinched the bridge of my nose. That's not exactly what happened. She said you scheduled some surgery without telling her. That you're being cruel and dismissive of her needs. Did she tell you what she asked me? Pause. She said she suggested a practical solution for starting a family, and you overreacted. A practical solution. Did she mention the practical solution involves her ex-husband's frozen sperm? Long silence. I'm sorry, what? Yeah. She wants to use her ex's genetic material to have a baby. Expected me to just be okay with raising another man's biological child. A man she was married to. That can't be right. She must have been a donor from a bank, or... Nope. Called the clinic 3 weeks ago to discuss using specifically her ex-husband's stored samples, without ever mentioning it to me. Her mom went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was different. I'll call you back. 20 minutes later, my wife came storming out of the bedroom where she'd been working remotely. Did you seriously just tell my mother about this? She called me, yelling at me for abandoning you. Thought she should know the actual situation. This was private, between us. Was it because you made it pretty public when you complained to her about my cruelty without mentioning you wanted to conceive with your ex's sperm? She didn't have a response for that. Just stood there fuming. Then came the escalation I wasn't expecting. Her ex-husband contacted me. Yeah, him. Got a message request on social media from some guy I didn't recognize at first. Opened it and my stomach dropped when I read, "Hey, my ex-wife reached out about the stored samples. Said you two were having issues over it. For what it's worth, I think her plan is reasonable. The genetic material is already paid for, and I have no intention of ever using it myself. Will be a waste to just destroy it. If you're worried about custody or me being involved, I'd sign whatever paperwork you need. No interest in being a father. Just trying to help facilitate." I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. She told her ex. She contacted him. They've been communicating about this. When I showed her the message, she had the audacity to look annoyed. He was just trying to help. I needed to confirm he was okay with it before we moved forward. Before we moved forward? I never agreed to anything. You would have, if you weren't being so stubborn and emotional about this. Emotional? About you coordinating with your ex-husband to have his biological child? What part of that shouldn't I be emotional about? The sperm is just cells. It doesn't mean anything. Then why does it have to be his cells specifically? She couldn't answer. Every time I asked that question, she deflected. It was practical. It was convenient. It would save money. I started sleeping in the guest room. She cried about it every night for a while. Things got worse when her sister got involved. Showed up at our place unannounced on Saturday afternoon. "I'm here to talk some sense into you," she announced, pushing past me into the living room. "Hello to you too. Do you have any idea how much my sister has sacrificed for this relationship? She gave up her dream of having kids young because you weren't ready. Now she's finally found a solution and you're being completely unreasonable. The solution is using her ex-husband's genetic material. So, it's just DNA. You're acting like she's cheating or something. She went behind my back for 3 weeks. Contacted the clinic. Contacted her ex. All without saying a word to me. How would you feel if your husband did that?" She waved her hand dismissively. "That's different. Ow. It just is. Her sister spent 2 hours trying to guilt me about my wife's biological clock and how selfish I was being. When I mentioned the vasectomy consultation, she lost it. You cannot get a vasectomy. That's basically reproductive abuse. Reproductive abuse? She wants to carry another man's child and expects me to be grateful. God, you're such a typical man. Making everything about yourself. Interesting take from someone defending her sister's plan to have her ex-husband's baby. The samples are already there. It's efficient, so is using a sperm bank. Anonymous donors exist. Why specifically her ex? She couldn't answer that either. Nobody could. Every time I asked that question, the room went silent. Because we all knew the answer, even if nobody wanted to say it out loud. She still had some attachment to him. Some fantasy. And I was supposed to just be okay funding and facilitating it. I asked her to leave. She did, but not before calling me a few choice names. The vasectomy consultation is tomorrow. I haven't told my wife. I'm definitely going. Update coming after. Update 2, 1 week later. Sorry for the delay. Things got messy. So I went to the vasectomy consultation. Didn't tell my wife because honestly, by that point, I wasn't sure we'd even stay married long enough for it to matter. The doctor was great, answered all my questions, scheduled the actual procedure for 3 weeks out. Reversible within a certain time frame if I changed my mind, but my mind felt pretty made up. Got home and walked into an ambush. My wife, her mother, her sister, and her ex-husband were all sitting in my living room. Let me repeat that. Her ex-husband was in my living room. What the hell is this? My wife stood up with this forced calm expression. This is an intervention. We're all here because we care about you, and we think you're making a huge mistake. I looked at her ex, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. You brought your ex-husband to our home to convince me to let you have his baby. He's here to reassure you that he has no intention of being involved. Tell him. Her ex cleared his throat. Look, man, I know this is weird, but I genuinely don't want kids. Never did. She and I split partly because of that. If she uses the samples, I'd sign over all parental rights. Never contact the kid, nothing. You be the father in every way that matters. Except genetically. Does that really matter that much? Would you raise another man's biological child with your ex-wife while that man sat in your living room? He didn't answer, just looked at his shoes. That's what I thought. My wife jumped in. He's just here to show good faith, to prove there's no ulterior motive. His presence is the ulterior motive. You can't just invite your ex-husband into our marriage because it's convenient. You're being ridiculous. This is about having a family. A family with his genetic material. Do you not hear yourself? Her mother jumped in. Sweetie, I know this is unconventional, but my daughter has wanted to be a mother for so long. You're standing in the way of her happiness. She could be a mother using donor sperm, using IVF with me. Adoption. There are a dozen options that don't involve her ex-husband's genetic material. But this option is right here. Already paid for. Why are you making this difficult? Her sister snorted. Because he's controlling and insecure. Obviously. I'd had enough. Everyone except my wife, get out of my house. This is my daughter's home, too. Get out. The silence was deafening. Her ex left first, practically running. Her sister huffed and made a show of taking her time. Her mother squeezed my wife's hand and whispered something before leaving. Once they were gone, my wife turned to me with tears streaming down her face. I can't believe you embarrassed me like that. Embarrassed you? You ambushed me in my own home with your ex-husband. He was trying to help. I don't want his help. I don't want his sperm. I don't want any of this. Then what do you want? I wanted a wife who would talk to me before making major life decisions. I wanted a partner who wouldn't go behind my back for weeks. I wanted my voice cracked. I wanted to matter more to you than your ex-husband's genetic material. She just stared at me. No apology. No acknowledgement. You're being dramatic, she finally said. That was it. That was the moment I knew. I walked to the bedroom, pulled out a duffel bag, and started packing. What are you doing? Where are you going? My buddy's place. I need some time. You can't just leave. Watch me. I stayed at my friend's apartment for 4 days. During that time, I consulted with a divorce attorney. Not filing yet, just understanding my options. We don't have kids, obviously. Own the house jointly, but bought it after marriage, so it's marital property Both have decent jobs, so alimony was unlikely either direction. Relatively clean split, if it came to that. While I was gone, my wife sent approximately 200 texts. The progression was almost predictable. Day 1, angry. You're being childish. Come home and talk like an adult. Day 2, sad. I miss you. Please come home. We can work this out. Day 3, manipulative. I spoke to a therapist who said, you're displaying avoidant attachment. You need help. Day 4, threatening. If you don't come home today, I'm calling a lawyer. I called her bluff. Went home on day 5, not because of her threat, but because I needed clothes and wanted to have a real conversation. Found her sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of her. What's all this? I've been doing research. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. About why men react the way you did. It's called genetic anxiety. It's a real thing. You're threatened by the idea of raising a child that isn't biologically yours because of primitive evolutionary psychology. So now I have a diagnosis. I'm not attacking you. I'm trying to understand. If we can work through this together, maybe with couples therapy. You want couples therapy so a professional can convince me to accept your ex-husband's child. That's not. Yes, it is. I sat down across from her. Let me be very clear. I'm never going to agree to this. Never. There is no amount of therapy, intervention, or family pressure that will change my mind. The fact that you went behind my back for weeks, involved your ex-husband, and orchestrated an ambush in our home has damaged my trust in ways I'm not sure I can recover from. So what are you saying? I'm saying we need to decide if this marriage can survive. Of course it can. We love each other. Love isn't enough when respect is gone. She started crying again. I was just trying to find a solution. You weren't ready for kids. I was getting older. I panicked. Then you should have talked to me. Not your ex. Not your family. Me. You would have said no. Yeah, I would have. And that should have been the end of it. But instead, you spent 3 weeks plotting behind my back. That's not panic. That's calculation. She had nothing to say to that. I gave her a choice. Full stop on the ex's sperm, complete transparency going forward, couples counseling to address the breach of trust, and she needed to tell her family to back off permanently. Her response, but what about having a baby? I got up and walked to the guest room. Started moving my things. What are you doing now? We're separating. I'll stay in the guest room until we figure out next steps. We can discuss the house with lawyers. Lawyers? Over this. Over trust, respect, and the fact that you still can't let go of your ex-husband's involvement in our life. Yeah, lawyers. She screamed at me for an hour. Called me every name imaginable. At one point threw a coffee mug at the wall. I just kept moving my stuff. That was 3 days ago. Final update, 3 weeks later. Never thought I'd be updating this, but here we are. My wife didn't take the separation well. The first week was a constant barrage of attempt to reconcile, each one coming with a condition that involved me compromising on my rigid stance. When I wouldn't budge, she shifted tactics. Her sister started a group chat with several of my wife's friends and some extended family. The message was something along the lines of, please reach out to my brother-in-law and help him see reason. He's throwing away his marriage over a simple misunderstanding. I got about a dozen messages from people I barely knew. All some version of marriage is about compromise and don't throw this away over pride. I responded to exactly one person, an old college friend of my wife's who I actually respected. Did anyone tell you the compromise involves me raising my wife's ex-husband's biological child? A plan she made in secret for 3 weeks, including direct contact with said ex. She didn't message me again, but I heard through the grapevine that she had some choice words for my wife about leaving out important details. My wife tried one more manipulative play during this period. She called my mother. Now, my mom is a reasonable woman who's always been polite to my wife, but she's also fiercely protective of her kids. According to my mom, the conversation went something like, "Wife, I'm so worried about your son. He's throwing away our marriage over a simple disagreement about family planning." Mom, a disagreement? He told me you wanted to use your ex-husband's frozen sperm. Is that true? Wife, well, yes, but it's just genetic material. It's practical. Mom, practical? Sweetheart, you asked my son to raise another man's child while married to him. That's not practical. That's delusional. And the fact that you can't see why that's a problem tells me everything I need to know about how you view him. Wife apparently hung up crying. Mom called me right after. I try to be nice about it, but some things just need to be said directly. That woman has lost her mind. Thanks, Mom. The turning point came when my wife's father called me. Her parents are divorced, and he lives out of state. We've always had a decent relationship, guy to guy. Son, I heard what's going on. Not going to tell you what to do. But I want you to know, when her mother called me about this, I told her she was out of her mind for supporting it. No man should be expected to raise another man's child with his own wife. That's not old-fashioned. That's just common sense. First person in her family to actually understand. I also want to apologize, he continued. I wasn't around much when she was growing up. Her mother filled her head with a lot of ideas about men being interchangeable, I guess. Providers, not partners. I think that's why she doesn't understand why this is such a big deal to you. To her, you're the guy who pays bills and changes diapers. The genetics don't matter because you don't really matter. Just your function. That hit hard because it explained a lot about how she'd been treating me throughout this whole thing. Not as a person with valid feelings, but as an obstacle to her goals. The divorce process started last week. I filed first. She was served at work. Called me screaming about how I humiliated her. Apparently being served by a professional process server in a private conference room was somehow public humiliation. She threatened to destroy me in court, take everything, make sure I regretted this for the rest of my life. My attorney wasn't worried. Threats are normal. She has no grounds for anything punitive. This will be a standard dissolution of a short marriage with no children. And she was right. Here's what the settlement looks like. The house will be sold. We both walk away with roughly half the equity after the mortgage is paid off. Not a windfall, but not nothing either. No alimony for either party. We both have stable incomes within 15% of each other. Judge saw no reason to award support. I keep my retirement accounts. She keeps hers. We split the savings account 50-50ths. She demanded I pay for emotional damages caused by the public humiliation of hiring a divorce attorney. Judge dismissed that in about 30 seconds. The divorce should be finalized within 2 months. Her lawyer tried a few last-ditch efforts. Claimed I had coerced her into the marriage by misrepresenting my willingness to have children. My lawyer presented text messages from 2 years ago where I clearly stated, I'm open to kids eventually. Let's revisit in a year or two. That argument died quickly. Then they tried claiming the vasectomy was done to spite her and should count as some kind of marital misconduct. Judge literally raised his eyebrows at that one. Ma'am, a man getting a legal medical procedure on his own body is not grounds for punitive action. Move on. Her lawyer looked embarrassed. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. As for her ex-husband, I got one final message from him after she was served. Sorry things worked out this way. For what it's worth, I tried to tell her this was a bad idea from start. Didn't respond. Don't care about his opinions. The aftermath has been interesting. Her mother sent me a 3-page letter about how I ruined her daughter's life and stole her chance at motherhood. I forwarded it to my lawyer for documentation and didn't engage. Her sister tried to corner me at a mutual friend's birthday party last weekend. Started loudly announcing to anyone who would listen that I was the guy who abandoned his wife because he couldn't handle not being the biological father. One of my friends corrected her. Actually, he's the guy who divorced his wife because she secretly planned to use her ex-husband's sperm without telling him. Get your facts straight. She left shortly after. I had a vasectomy 2 weeks ago. Recovery was fine. Some discomfort, but nothing major. My buddy joked that I was shooting blanks by choice now. Not funny, but I laughed anyway. My wife found out about the vasectomy through the shared insurance claims we still have until the divorce is final. She sent one final text. You got the vasectomy, so you never wanted kids with me anyway. This was all about control. I finally responded. It was about respect, something you never had for me. Good luck with your ex's sperm. I hope you find what you're looking for. She sent about 15 more messages after that, ranging from, you're going to regret this till I gave you the best years of my life, to my personal favorite. The therapist says you have narcissistic traits, and I was in a trauma bond. Wild how she diagnosed me through a therapist she'd apparently seen twice. Blocked her after that. My lawyer handles all communication now. Where am I now? Honestly, I'm okay. Not great, but okay. The apartment I'm renting is small but quiet. Work has been a decent distraction. My family has been supportive without being overbearing. My mom sent me a care package with my favorite snacks and a card that just said, "Proud of you for knowing your worth." Made me tear up a little. Not gonna lie. Do I regret how I handled things? Some of it. I wish I'd confronted her the moment she mentioned the clinic instead of doing the passive-aggressive vasectomy appointment reveal. That was petty, but I don't regret the divorce. I don't regret protecting myself. Some people in the comments of my earlier post said I should have tried harder, compromised more, been more understanding of her desire to be a mother. But here's the thing. Her desire to be a mother was never the problem. The problem was her complete disregard for me as a person. The secrecy, the manipulation, the ambush, the expectation that I'd just fall in line because she'd already decided. That's not partnership. That's not respect. That's not love. She wanted a sperm donor who would pay half the mortgage and change diapers. I wanted a wife. Last I heard, she's moved back in with her mother. Still has the frozen samples at the clinic. Apparently her ex rescinded his cooperation after the divorce was filed, something about not wanting to be involved in drama. So now she'd have to go through legal channels to use them, which is expensive and complicated. Karma? Maybe. Or maybe just consequences. Her sister reached out one more time, about a week after the divorce was finalized. Different tone this time. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize. I didn't know the full picture. My sister has a way of telling stories that edit out the parts that make her look bad. When I finally got the whole truth from our dad, I realized how out of line I was. I didn't respond. The apology doesn't undo the months of harassment and guilt tripping. But I didn't block her either. Maybe that counts for something. Her ex-husband apparently started dating someone new. Posted about it. My wife lost her mind, according to mutual friends. Something about him moving on too fast and disrespecting what they had. The irony of her saying that while trying to have his baby during our marriage was apparently lost on her. Her mother still sends occasional letters. My lawyer has a nice collection. We're keeping them in case she escalates to actual harassment. For now, they're just sad monologues about how I destroyed her family. Lady, your daughter destroyed her own family. I just refuse to be the collateral damage. Either way, I'm done. Moving forward, one day at a time. Thanks for reading. And guys, trust your gut. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone gaslight you into accepting less than you deserve. Peace.
In religion, if you don't do this, then this will happen. And don't get me wrong, I think that a healthy amount of consequences for your bad behavior is important. But I also think that there's a whole other level of possibly irrational fear that comes from the fact that you might go to hell or you might be rejected from your religious group, and the community that you built in your religious group might reject you, or the fear that you're never fully alone, that God is always watching you. That can create a lot of fear and paranoia, I would say. And then the last negative impact of mainstream religion would be the absolute meltdown that comes when somebody relies on religion for stability and then religion fails. For example, let's say you're praying for something, you're praying about something, and then God doesn't give that to you. God doesn't listen to your prayers. God doesn't make your prayers come true. The psychological battle that comes with that would be excruciating. When your entire reality is based in religion, it would be catastrophic to your sense of reality if your prayers don't work, your prayers don't come true. because you rely so heavily on religion to give you a sense of stability. And if it doesn't work, praying doesn't work, talking to God doesn't work, etc., your entire reality would be rattled, because you base your reality on the fact that God's up there, or gods are up there, or whatever. Inevitably, I would say, if you're religious, you'll have moments of doubt where you're like, wait a minute, is all of this real and true? Because I've been praying about this, or I've been praying about that, and my prayers aren't coming true. And there's inevitably going to be a moment in a religious person's life where they doubt their religion. And that would be so terrifying when you're basing everything on this religion. You're putting all of your eggs in that basket. You're planning your life around the rules of this religion and the fact that God is up there, or gods are up there. A feeling of doubt would be catastrophic and terrifying, because it would shake your reality. Everything that soothes you when you're anxious, everything that gives you peace of mind when you're going through it, would become all one big question mark. Next, let's talk about the positive impacts of mainstream religion. I would say